Welcome to this week's episode of The Rutledge Perspective. My name is Laurel, your host, and I am absolutely thrilled to have our guest today. I know I say that all the time, but I have such cool women who come on the show, and I'm really excited to have Allison. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why I'm excited to have Allison. But let me just say, she is in my mastermind group with me. She is just an incredible individual, and her story is going to be one that I really think resonates right now, especially as many of us are trying to figure out how we're going to move and pivot through this time of COVID and everything else, because it is timely not only for now, but even as you're going forward. So Allison, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and I'm going to give you guys a little introduction of Allison, and her bio is also going to be, when the podcast posts, you'll be able to see it there as well. So Allison is the founder and CEO of the Revenue Academy, a seasoned revenue marketing strategist and a business consultant. She has worked in marketing, sales, and strategic consulting for over 20 years. And she has worked with companies like Boeing, Honeywell, Sprint, Exxon, Aramark, and Microsoft. She has run her own consulting practice for about 4 years, working with smaller companies to build and deploy the infrastructure required to operate successful revenue marketing programs. And that's really important, guys. And her stuff is just incredible. She worked at Marketo and Adobe Company in enterprise sales for 5 years, where she fell in love with helping teams align and succeed in the evolving landscape of marketing and sales. And she has been a Vistage member in the Portland, Oregon chapter for 5 years, which is an amazing organization, and has developed a proprietary revenue maturity model that she uses in her consulting practice to establish a revenue maturity score and a baseline with her customers. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Revenue Academy as well. In December of 2019, she recognized that her family needed more stability and she needed more corporate exposure and experience to take her online products and programs to the next level. She sought out her next role, was very picky, and is now serving as a principal strategy consultant for the fast-growing San Francisco technology company Rollworks, which is a division of Nextroll. Allison, I just can't wait for people to hear your story because this is going to be so awesome. So here's where I want to start. Let's talk a little bit about your role now, because then I want people to understand where you are, and then we're going to talk through the journey. So maybe give us a little bit about what you're doing and how that's working now.
Yeah. So right now, currently, my role is a account manager, which would be the most relative, or I guess corporate term that people would understand. Account management in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco, high-tech companies is all really synonymous. You can find that role. What we actually do, and it's a principal account manager for the company Rollworks, and they are an account-based marketing technology. So they would be similar to like a competing product that has a little bit more momentum behind it would be Demand Base is another one that people might have heard of. Another similar company would be one I previously worked for called Marketo or HubSpot. Those types of technologies is what we're talking about.
So lots of HubSpot commercials lately.
Yep. So all of that type of MarTech is what it is. And I serve as a principal account manager. And what I do is I go into some of their largest accounts. Actually, there are teams, we represent 30% to 40% of the organization's revenue. There's about 1,000 employees at this organization. They're pre-IPO. They will probably IPO at some point in the next couple of years. And then I lead the services and all of the strategy work for the largest. So let's say like Honeywell is one of my customers, Snowflake, which is a huge cloud company, Upwork, which many consultants or freelancers have heard of as a customer of mine. So it's educating them on what account-based marketing is, because the marketing vernacular is incredibly confusing to many people, whether you're a small business owner or a marketing director or even a CMO of a huge company. It's all different. So we are an account-based marketing solution. That's a new terminology as it relates to marketing and sales. So it's educating, it's helping them map strategies and tactics, and ultimately it's really proving that the investment that the executives have approved to make is worthwhile and there is a return on it. So I go and consult with these companies and help them learn and execute upon these bigger strategies of their investment.
I love that. And as we talk about this too, which I think you guys are going to really be interested in, is Allison I said a little bit in her bio, really did create a proprietary process to really do exactly what she's doing now as well, is to help companies understand that there is a return on investment in marketing dollars, and help marketing teams figure out how to help people understand what that investment is. Because marketing, just like accounting, not so much accounting, but marketing, HR, IT, unless you are selling tech, right? All of those kind of functions, the back office functions, are cost centers. We're not necessarily generating revenue. But if you can start to understand the language of business and tie what you do directly to ROI, it makes it so much easier to have those budget conversations, right? So
Yeah.
Allison, it's just, and your Revenue Academy was incredible. And I want people to understand that too. So let's go back. So you were in corporate, and then you made the pivot to go to do your own business, and then did the marketing consulting first, and then pivoted again in that to do your own thing, and then pivoted again to say, you know what, I'm going to do something else right now because this is still in my wheelhouse, but I want some more kind of foundation.
Yep.
People kind of through that journey.
Yeah. So, I've been in marketing and sales now for 20 plus years. And my journey wasn't that much different than a lot of my peers, which was I worked in an agency at the beginning, and then I was a marketing director on the brand side of a professional services company for 15 years. I thought the grass would be greener back on the agency side. I'd ping pong back and forth.
Right.
What really was revolutionary to me was when I took the job at Marketo, which is now an Adobe company, as we talked about, I made the change from marketing to sales. And when I did that, first of all, I realized how much I actually loved sales. I liked being on the front lines. I liked the pay of sales a little better than marketing, if I was being honest. But I really got to cut my teeth not only in that cross functionality from going from a marketing director to a sales executive, but I just learned that other piece of the business and how much they're different. And that was a growing corporate, sold for multiple billions of dollars to Adobe a couple of, 5 years ago now. And, in watching a change of leadership regime in that corporate environment, dealing with a lot of the things that you just don't have control over. I mean, I was still learning. I was making good money. I had all the stock options. I did all the stuff, like climbing the ladder, et cetera. But right when I felt like I had enough exposure, and I also stayed very passionate about helping people. So I wanted to take all of those learnings and not just be like, cha-ching, another deal closed, cha-ching, another deal closed. I wanted to actually go back or kind of leave. I wanted to leave that environment. I didn't want to do corporate anymore. I was done with travel. Can't do that anymore for now. I was done with layers and layers of leadership changes, and I just was over it. I was tired. I had 2 little kids. I didn't want to do it anymore, and I was scared, but I knew I could help people. I knew if I could go from working with these huge companies, with these huge teams that ultimately kind of intimidated me at the beginning, but they're just people. And so I succeeded there. And then I left Marketo in 2015, and I was super scared, but I started my own professional services company called Intersect Solutions, which is still somewhat alive and well, intersectsolutions.com. I did that for 5 years. I built close to or at $1 million consulting company, a team of 10 people. I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to challenge myself. I knew I could pivot my experience and my methodologies and my services plans to smaller businesses who didn't know what revenue marketing or any of those things really meant, back to the confusing aspects of marketing and sales. So that's what I did, and I did that for 5 years, and that's where I met you, and I joined a mastermind group that was, I would highly encourage those who are making changes and making pivots to seek out that type of support structure. It was really amazing. But then, and you had alluded to, okay, then you pivoted again.
Yes.
So if anyone is out there and they've started a professional services company, you know that it's the grind all the time. It's,
Yes.
It's the same as corporate hours. It's hard. It's dealing with a lot of people. It's people resources. And I wanted to productize those services, and I wanted to make it more price available. I didn't want to always have to charge this high value of human resource. I wanted to package and productize some solutions that were easy, digestible, and tangible, which is when I started to think about and launch my online program that you alluded to called the Revenue Academy. And the Revenue Academy was all about the very basic, simple things that every small business owner has to do in order to scale revenue generation, business development, and sales. And an example of that, and I think you took this course, Laurel, was how do I start to deeply understand my customer? So I created a course called Know Your Customer. And it was it's a framework to really get under the hood, into the head of your customer, and realize that you have to put them first when you're doing communications, and when you're advertising, and when you're messaging, and when you're doing this type of thing, is really understand what makes them tick and how to serve them and what they really need. And that's when you can start to message and communicate and build conversations and relationships. So very basic, but very critical part of generating relationships, which generate revenue.
Right.
In an organization. So I did that, super successful, got it off the ground, had about 100 people go through my courses. I fell in love with the program. And then I realized, and this is, part of life, I realized that my own family, I have another entrepreneur in my household, my husband, who owns gyms, fitness facilities. I started getting nervous about our financial position, our stability, the time we were spending away from our kids. And as much as there was no part of me that wanted to give up what I had built, I knew I know I'm employable. I know that I can, go get a corporate job and generate the financial stability I needed for my family, and the predictability and the benefits and all those things that come with corporate. So I decided I was very picky, very, very picky.
As you should be.
Right. And so I leveraged that experience of, running my own company and building a product and launching a product. And I was telling you just the other day, as we were talking about this, what made me an attractive candidate for the role I have now was not my years of experience, my high profile client list, or any of that stuff. It was the fact that I was willing to take a risk, and I was willing to recognize when a change needed to occur so that I could advance. So that's what was attractive to me as a candidate. And so I was offered a job within 2 weeks of seeking it out, like the one I wanted. And that's what did it. So I just wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid to go back.
And what is so key, there's so much stuff there to unpack, because this is what I think what often happens is there are people who get in corporate and love corporate. That is what they want to do, and they love it. And then there are people who start out as entrepreneurs, and that's what they do, and they love it. And then there are those of us who are kind of in the middle, right? Some who started corporate, but we're like, yeah, done, tired, not doing this anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing because I know I have the skills to do it.
Yeah.
And we still have the opportunity to go back when we decide, and whether or not we want to, whether or not we decide we have to, it is something that is always an opportunity. And I think people often think if you've gone out and done your own business and you've either sold it or you decided, hey, I need a little bit more stability right now, like you were saying, people look at that and say, oh, well, you didn't make it. No.
Yeah.
There is a different level of strength and courage and commitment to just go on to that entrepreneurial thing. And as you said, your employer now wasn't valuing, well, they valued your experience and what you had, but what really sold them was the fact that you would take risks and that you also would make the hard decisions. And that's so important with executives, right? It's so important. So if you think about kind of this movement, I want to talk about two things. One, I want to talk about the Revenue Academy from the standpoint of how you think about services versus products, because you and I are kind of in the same right, because I've got, the services side, but also the resource with the product and what that does for a business. But I also want to start first and say, how did you, as you started thinking about this next role you wanted to do and being picky to go back in, what are you finding now that you're back in corporate?
Oh my goodness.
Good. And then what have you had to kind of adjust to?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'll start it by, I'm going to go back just a touch and comment on the fact that I had so many comments and I made this change. So I started Intersect Solutions and Revenue Academy in 2016. I kind of, closed it down for a period of time, if you will, this past December in 2019. To your earlier point, I got so many, I got this a lot when I was making the announcement of the change. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, no, I'm not sorry. Don't be sorry. Like, I'm super stoked about this next move. It was very calculated. It was for the stability, as I mentioned personally, but also with a very keen strategy to go in and learn what I don't know and take on, consume more information, make sure that my offering in the Revenue Academy is still on par with what the market needs. So there were some very specific reasons I did that there was no reason to be sorry about. So that's one. And then to your question, so the things going back into corporate that now that I've had the experience of entrepreneurship and productizing, all that stuff, for one, I am an incredibly grateful employee.
Yes.
I am much more empathetic to executive level folks that are navigating, especially now in what's happening in many of businesses and at big corporate levels.
Right.
I appreciate the expenses that go along with being an employee. I don't feel as entitled as I maybe thought I was before when I didn't know how it felt, what it meant to get, provide benefits to people, make sure that all of the T's were crossed and I's were dotted as it related to insurances and workman's comp and all of the HR related functionalities. I mean, that is a incredible experience and level of responsibility that I just took for granted when I hadn't done it myself. So that's one. And that's a positive, I think. I sent our CEO of our company, as he was addressing our entire workforce around a reduction in force because of COVID. And just the way he was personally having to process, I sent him a thank you for being so empathetic and genuine in his addresses. I don't know if I would have done that before, but I just really felt for him. And I thought he was doing a tremendous job navigating that. So that's one thing. The one thing, a thing on the kind of, oh man, I had to adjust to this a little bit category was, during a more corporate formal review process and those types of procedural things that you just find in corporate that are more formal.
Right.
I've operated on my own. I've led a team of 10. I've reviewed a team of 10. I've put roles and responsibilities in place. I definitely have a more personal style. Like I really want to get to deeply know people that I'm working with, especially if they were working for me.
Right.
And I just went through a review cycle and I did feel a little prickly, because of the formality. I had a great review, but I also felt a little bit like, I've been there, done that before, and my expectations of somebody now reviewing me and my work and my contributions are, I have high expectations there.
Right.
And so, there's maybe some work that could be done there, but it's just different. So that's kind of some observations that I could share about going back into corporate.
Yeah. Well, and what's so interesting, and one of the things that I find fascinating is I remember when I was first getting ready to go out, and very few people knew, and my family was really supportive. They were a little scared. They're like, "Are you sure?"
Right.
But they knew me, right? But there were other people when I finally said I was leaving. First in corporate, you get that. Well, where are you going? Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you working for? Where are you going?
You do.
And then I'm like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And then you get the, wait, what? Well, what do you mean do your own thing? And very few people are truly like, that is so cool. I can't believe you're doing that. They're more like, do you know what your position was? Do you know how much money you're giving up? All of these things, like, are you crazy? And I remember Lisa Nichols saying, don't get upset when other people don't get your vision, because God didn't give it to them. He gave it to you. And so to hear, that you not only leaving corporate, but then even going back in when people are like, oh, I'm so sorry, it didn't work. You're really going back? It's like this, even well-meaning people who know you well and are very supportive. It is so difficult for people to understand change, right? Because that's what pivots are. They're change. They are not necessarily failures. They are not necessarily mistakes. They're not necessarily any of that, or they may be a combination of all of that. But fundamentally, it's just change. And because most people hate change or are uncomfortable with change, even if someone else is doing it, it could be, oh, I really want to do that, but I'm scared. So, let me poke holes in this one. Not to poke holes in it, but it's almost poking holes in my desire to go, right? So
Yeah.
as you think about like moving forward and really diving into this and learning, because that's the other thing I think was so critical for you guys to hear, is that Allison said, I went back because there was stuff that I still wanted to learn. There were gaps I wanted to fill, and I wanted to make sure that what I was delivering to my clients was still on par with what the market wanted. Such a marketer, right? Know your customer. What is the problem you're trying to solve, right?
True.
But that perspective, whether it's a career or building a business, of what else can I learn, and are my skills going to deliver to the market a solution, is key. It's key.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's funny to hear you say that back, because I, at the beginning, I think I told my husband, or someone at least, I said, I'm going to look at this as due diligence for my next adventure. And I wasn't, if I'm being really honest and transparent, when I developed the methodologies that I put in place for Revenue Academy and the courses and the programs, I didn't want it to just be good. I wanted it to be amazing and really helpful to growing marketers and incoming marketers, and people who wanted to learn the functions of marketing and how they're related to sales. There was multiple dimensions and a lot there. And I felt like I needed more meat on the bone. And so at the beginning of this new role, as I said, it's an account-based marketing, which I'm not as, and wasn't as proficient at that I was with demand generation and inbound marketing and marketing strategy and brand and all those things. And I felt like that was something like an arrow in my quiver. Is that I needed that to round out my experience so that I could be credible. I want to be as credible as possible. And so going and working in the most progressive marketing space in the world, in some ways, in Silicon Valley and MarTech companies, technology leads.
Yes.
And so and to work with and have my customers be some of the, Fortune 50 marketers, like that's pretty great due diligence that I have the opportunity to be a part of. So yeah, I have no issues on, I need to learn more, always learning, I can get better. And for the purposes of making products and services better and more valuable and more credible.
Absolutely. And that's what, last week, the whole thing about, that I was talking about was being a lifelong learner. And it's critical. It is critical for leaders to be prepared and to learn, because we don't all know everything. And to have the courage and the humility and like you said, the drive to you don't want it to just be good. You want it to be excellent. And there's a lot of stuff out there, guys. There's a lot of stuff. And there are 7 billion people on the planet. And so there's something for everyone. And there are those people who truly want stuff that is exceptional, that's really great, that gets them where they need to be, that helps them learn and helps them grow and helps them get deeper. And so when you look at someone like an Allison and you hear what she's saying, she was developing something for that client that really wanted to understand the return. How do you generate revenue? It just so happens that she's talking about generating revenue through some of the skills around marketing, right? And branding and strategy. But it was all about revenue generation, which is the whole point. Well, other than purpose, because you want to do good work. But you can't do good work if you're also not generating money. It's that whole vicious cycle, right? Even when I tell people with HR, you're a business person first and an HR person second. Not because you don't have empathy and you don't care about people, but if there is no business, no one has a job. So you've got to understand the business and how revenue is generated, right? So fantastic. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. So let's talk now about Revenue Academy.
Okay.
Because, because I did take the course that you put up and it was just phenomenal. And, again, coming out of corporate, I work with marketing. I knew marketing, whatever that means. Excuse me. And I know in the first of a few conversations, I would say, okay, wait, back up. I mean, I hear the words that you're saying and I understand the words that you're saying, but help me understand what that means, right? Yeah. In terms of what I'm doing for my business. So talk a little bit about how you structured Revenue Academy and that real purpose of moving people forward through that.
Yeah. What's funny even to hear again, like, the name Revenue Academy in itself, like you just said, okay, we're purpose driven. We want to be vision oriented. But at the end of the day, we got to make money. So, coming out of working in, I'll just say it, a more masculine sales force, dealing with revenue driving roles, those types of things for many years. I did. And like I said earlier, I did start to understand obviously the critical nature of revenue generation. And I kind of wanted to brass tacks it out. So I wanted to call it what it was. And I still sometimes in part of my thinking about what will the Revenue Academy, what does it need to be and how will it serve its customers eventually more than it is already, is the name itself. Like, is it too masculine? Is it offensive? Is it, and I quibbled with that and went on and on. Should it be something softer? Should it be something lighter, sexier, whatever?
Right.
And I just decided, no, it shouldn't, because what I'm teaching is, to your point, the fundamentals of how a business will progress,
right?
How that fits in. And I don't want to be shy about it. The things that marketing does is to drive bottom line, top line in an organization. Doesn't mean we don't do that with purpose, vision, creativity, inspiration, etc. Just kind of that I stuck with the Revenue Academy because ultimately the things I was teaching or the things I teach in the courses online and otherwise should help the organization grow from a revenue perspective.
Right.
So how I put that together was I broke down, from a marketing perspective, what are the key fundamentals, key areas that we have to focus in. And then to support sales, to support the closing of deals, to support the acquisition of customers, to support revenue growth.
Right.
And ultimately, we looked at 3 key areas, and that was the revenue leadership in an organization, whether it be very small or very large and corporate.
Right.
So who represents a revenue team, revenue leadership? The second element that we started to construct and break down was revenue processes. What are the processes strategically and tactically that go into the creation of new revenue, whether again, customer marketing, new customer acquisition, deal stages, all the things. And it's very geeky in some ways. And then the third area was the revenue, the information technology, the tech that then enabled those processes to scale. So we broke those down and then we built a methodology around it. We have 55 different attributes that we'll assess in an organization that tells us where are you from a maturity perspective.
Right.
We did that in our consulting practice. We assessed about 400 companies and realized some very common themes that were, hold on, in that revenue leadership area, companies weren't necessarily aligned. Like when I say companies, meaning the leadership team.
Right.
We're not aligned on who their target customer is, what their value propositions were, what stories they were telling, what actual value they offered. So I said, let's back this truck up and go back to the basics and say, no, that's where I crafted the course, Know Your Customer. Another one would be, tell your customer story. What is your customer story? What is the story? What is the value? How are you connecting with your customer? Right. So those are two examples of that. And it's not high tech. That's not techie. That's like, as an organization, you should know. And if you know who they are, you've done the work, then you can relate to them. Then you can serve them. Then you can offer value to them. All the fancy things like life cycle marketing and pipeline and all of that you don't excel there unless you know that customer. So that, because we saw it as a common theme through our assessment work, we were able to create a package, a program, a course that taught people like this, provided frameworks like a customer canvas, organize the information, work across your teams, and the output would be, in that case, a full 360-degree view of your customer that then data can back into later.
Yes.
So productization in those areas was not easy, but we found a method to our madness and were able to find some frameworks that worked.
Well, and what's so key about that, not only are the courses fantastic, and really good for people who are not marketing experts. Because again, I came out of corporate, the language wasn't unusual or unknown to me, but the deep connection of the marketing language to customer and revenue, what's different? Because that just wasn't my wheelhouse. But what's interesting about what you said as well is that I don't know if people heard is Allison took her team and the work that they had done on her services side, her consulting side, and said, yes, we're doing good work and we're delivering great stuff for our customers, but we're also learning from our customers, and we are taking what we're seeing and we're taking the data that we see and we are informing our next processes. We are informing our next delivery of even services or a product by what we're actually seeing. And I think often, whether it's our career, we're trying to decide on the next step we want to take, or it's a business and we're trying to get the next customer, what have you. I don't know that we individually take time to learn and appreciate the experiences that we have and understand that every single experience begins to build a framework and a base of data for us to use as we move forward, right? I mean, that is masterful, Allison.
Oh, good. I hope it's helpful. It's interesting because I think had I not created that maturity assessment, and to be honest, we did it so that we get sticky in our consulting customers.
Right.
But that was our intention. That was our thought process during the creation of it. But what wowed us and allowed us to move forward, to your point, informed us, was their data. I was at that point, I was just an interviewer. I was just giving them questions that it was their responses and their sentiment and the data that pulled that allowed us to say, I mean, it's like product research or what have you. I just don't think I was sophisticated enough to understand that. Now I would do it more. But yeah, for sure. And it was, and we did a bunch of reviews after we launched a few of our courses, and I thought it was too rudimentary, but I'm a 20 plus year seasoned marketer.
Right.
And what I kept getting back was, it's not. You need to even make it maybe even more, either smaller, digestible, or because people want to learn, they want to be proficient, and it takes a lot to take all of the experience and knowledge you have and boil it down into something that someone else beginning their learning journey can apply.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. And I remember when we would have these conversations, even in our mastermind retreats, right? I would be talking about HR things and comments and use language. And I know, and people were like, wait, what? Can you say that again? And it was the same thing with marketing. And we forget, because we've been in it so long, it's not that we assume people know what we're talking about. It's that we don't think about the fact that someone won't know what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's a kind of a different perspective. It's not that we're assuming people are stupid or we're assuming people are smarter. We just don't think as much about the delivery of the message or the delivery of the expertise as we do about just the knowledge itself, and how we got to package it the right way so that people can digest it and can understand it. And the more expertise you have, the more important it is for you to pay attention to the fact that everyone around you may not have that expertise and may not have the confidence to say, I don't get it or I don't understand.
I always say, if I had $1 for every time I heard from one of my customers, still with all of my roles, I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
But that's beautiful, because
yes.
it allows you to, I love when I hear that, because then I say, it makes me stop and say, gosh, you're right. Almost, shame on me for either talking too quickly or talking too fast or making assumptions. And that's not right. You're asking for information that I have innately or just intuitively. And that's a very fair time to pause and stop and appreciate, seek more, be more curious. I would also say in that regard, I think, and you probably will relate to this too, anyone who wants to take that leap out of corporate and thinks, will anyone want this? Or can I package this out? Or if you're an expert in anything, like you said, there is someone groups of people who really need that expertise. You just have to be willing and unafraid. You have to be willing to put the work in and unafraid and confident. And so it's difficult and complex, but man, there's an audience out there for anything.
Yes.
Just anything.
Clearly.
Yeah, there really is.
If nothing else tells you that, just watch the as seen on TV ads for all of the gadgets that you're thinking, I never knew I needed that, right?
Yeah. But man, knowing your customer, that's why I start with it. It is so darn critical, and just people kind of skip over that step and make too many assumptions. So
yes, exactly. And I remember having a conversation with one of our coaches who's a social media expert, who has her own business as well, who's just phenomenal. And we were talking about things, and this was, again, coming out of corporate, and I'm not a social media fan. You guys who've been following me know that. And yet doing this, you have to be on social media. And I remember having these conversations, and I was boosting posts, and I remember having this conversation with Bridget, and she's like, okay, but did you boost a post or did you do an ad? I'm like, I don't know. I paid some money and it said it did something, right? So she's like, and she said, well, and I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do going forward. Bridget, I want you to assume I know nothing. I said, because if you say something that I know, my commitment to you is say, okay, that I understand. And then we can move to the next thing. But I need you to assume I know zero, right? And it was so great, because I thought, oh, now here's an ad and here's a boosted post. And this is why you do which of each one. And the kind of.
And that was saying to Bridget, I don't know what I don't know, help me. And probably, that is the best way to get the most out of an expert consultant. And because to all the things we were just saying, but that is really a critical piece, especially if you're starting your own business and you got to pay people.
Exactly. Yes.
Tell them out front. And the other thing I will say, it's so interesting that you just said you're not a social media, everyone who knows me, I don't think any of us love it, but I will also make the comment of, it's okay to back off of those channels a little bit. Like in my case, I went hard and fast, and I paid a lot of money for high level production of videos, and I delved into and with both hands and feet to all the social media channels, and I wasn't getting the response as quickly as I had hoped. And I wasn't upset. I knew why. I knew the why. I wasn't boosting posts. I wasn't putting money into it. My consistency, I needed some time that I didn't have. And I had to admit to myself that that's okay. My time to do that piece of this business is not now. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. I know I need to show up to be in service to those people who will, are interested and want to be a part of the Revenue Academy, but I couldn't at that moment in time, and it's okay. So it's okay. And it's there, and I got really far with it. And again, I do have some customers, and I'm super excited to bring it back around, but when I'm ready.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think that's important to give yourself grace if you do have to take a step back or make a change. It's a break. It's not a failure. It's or whatever anyone wants to say. It's a calculated break, which is fine.
Absolutely. And that's a word that's important here on the Rutledge Perspective too, is grace. You've got to give yourself grace, because if you heard what Allison was saying as well, it's that, she wasn't ready to do that yet. It wasn't the time for her to do that piece yet, that kind of social media blast. And really, she dug in, as we all did when we were in this mastermind. We were all like, we got to post, we got a video, we got to, and did that. But there's so much more to that than just showing up, right? And you have to show up to serve, but there's got to be energy around it. There's got to be strategy around that. There's stuff that happens, and it's okay to not be ready right now. Do the stuff that you're ready for right now, so that you're prepping yourself for the next step. Because if you're someone like me as well, who just, I do hate being on camera. So we'll just be real about that. I hate being on camera, but not because of, I know, but it's just because I like just getting stuff done and being behind the scenes. Yet I know that in order for people to find me, for me to serve, because it's all about service, in order for me to serve, I have to be in front of the camera. And so, but knowing that also means there's a level of energy that's needed. There's all this other kind of stuff that's needed. And I also have to take care of me. And my energy is renewed by solitude and quiet. Solitude and quiet. I know that about me. So I also know, hey, Laurel, you really got to get more focused on planning ahead, because that way, it's all out there and you can take that time down. And, when you're doing video, you schedule them appropriately, so you don't have 42 back-to-back, because you will be so drained by the end. So when you hear Allison talking about, look, I pivoted, it was the right thing to do. It was a calculated break. When she talks about giving yourself grace, when she talks about not being ready, it's okay to not be ready. Yes. You just want to keep moving forward, whatever that looks like. So Allison, besides giving yourself grace, what would you tell people, like the biggest learning that you have had through your journey so far, even if it's one or two, the biggest thing that you have learned up to this point?
I think the biggest, outside of the just recognizing that, back to the beginning, that we are always learners, and to stay humble and focused, because you don't know it all, you'll never know it all, and arrogance and thinking you know it all will never serve you, and so, or anyone else. Right. And for me, it's a tough dynamic to know if you're in charge, if you're the CEO, and people are looking at you to have all the answers, and you don't. That's just, and you don't. Some of those dynamics are difficult to work through. So just learning, always knowing and staying open and listening to other people's perspectives, staying curious and seeking those things out to help drive you forward. You don't have all the answers, and you never will. So staying open to learning, seeking out perspectives that even don't favor your own at all, and staying curious is number one for sure. And then just number two would be, I'm just not afraid. I'm happy and proud. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to make changes. I'm not afraid to go downshift. I don't have, just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
I love that, because it's and I love the word downshift. It's not a step back. It is a downshift. And just think about it. if you, for those of us who, have driven 5 speeds, which I love driving 5 speed, you downshift so you can get more like torque so you can climb the mountain, right? So it is, I love that downshift versus step back, because people think step back, even when we talk about careers, we talk about moving laterally as opposed to just up. And sometimes you step back as opposed to just moving forward. I love I'm going to coin that downshift.
Downshift.
Taking a downshift.
Yeah.
Because that gives
I
you
got to go in gear 2 before I go back to gear 5. It's just the way it is.
I love that. I love that. And I know you guys probably think we planned this, but Allison used all of those perspective keywords. She used perspective, she used grace, she used lifelong learning, and she used curiosity. You guys know how I feel about being curious. Curiosity is like, that is like the
superpower.
Rosetta Stone. Yeah. Because if you're curious about your customers, you're curious about your own skills, you're curious about continuing to learn. When you're curious and genuinely curious, that's how you know what questions to ask. That's how you listen differently, because you're listening to learn, not to respond.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. And so with that learning, then what is maybe the biggest piece of guidance you might give someone, whether they're just trying to figure out whether they're even going to leave corporate, or whether they're at a time where they really need to think about a pivot? What would your biggest piece of guidance be?
Yeah, I would say, I think more tactically, honestly, I'm a big thinker. I'm a top down thinker. And so for me, sometimes I stay up here and it's hard for me to execute upon a decision. I'm decisive. But to get to that point where I'm decisive and confident, writing down those pros and cons, like if it's weighing heavy on you, actually take the time to document, assess, and maybe review with a peer or a coach or what have you. We all want to feel good about our next moves. Right. And if it's a downshift, it's okay to want that, you got this, the understanding in someone else that that knows what you're actually trying to do. And I think the documentation and giving yourself the processing time before big decisions are made, and taking 24 hours, 48 hours, go back to it. Don't do it in haste. But as simple as pros and cons list, and really knowing how. Somebody challenged me once to, what is your 5-year plan? And sometimes I'm like, too much.
What? So, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, right?
I asked, can I modify that? And so I did it. For me, I do a 30, 60, 120, 360. Like, if I can just put it in that framework and know where I want to get in those little pieces and work backwards from there, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. But the documentation of that and the exploration of my thoughts combined with those I trust, their perspective to help me through those pivots, difficult decisions, was really helpful.
Oh, I love it. So. Allison, I just knew this was going to be great. So thank you. Thank you. This has been amazing. Because it's so timely, because again, so many people are making really tough decisions right now. And I do call them tough because any decision around change is hard. Any decision around change is hard. Knowing that you have to make one may be easy because there's a pain point, right? So you've got to do something different. But the actual decision making and then acting on that is hard. And so this talking to you and having people see someone who has made those pivots, who has understood that it's just a downshift, it's not a failure, is, I think, incredible. And I am so appreciative of your time. Thank you so much for sharing.
You are so welcome.
It was fantastic. And those of you who are listening, thank you so much for tuning in to the Rutledge Perspective. And we're going to put Allison's bio up there, and we'll also put her contact information so you'll have it. And with the Revenue Academy as well. So we'll have everything up there for you so you can see it. And just stay strong. Don't be afraid to pivot. As Allison said, don't be afraid. Just do it. Downshift, make that change. Do a 30, 60, 90, 120, or if a 5-year thing works for you, or just a simple pro-con list. But you got this. You have the ability to make change and to really understand where you want to go and do the right thing for you. So thank you for tuning in. We will catch you next week. And thank you for listening to the Rutledge Perspective. Take care. You've been watching the Rutledge Perspective. Thank you for tuning in. If we have given you a different perspective, or if you've learned something new that you hadn't thought about before, please subscribe to the Rutledge Perspective podcast where you get your favorite podcasts, and give us a like on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher. We really appreciate it. And your feedback is important as well, as we use that to inform our next episodes. You can also head over to my website, laurelrutledge.com, and download a freebie called Where's My Mojo that can really help you get out of your rut or maybe talk you back off that ledge of frustration. You can also find previous episodes of the Rutledge Perspective on laurelrutledge.com. I really appreciate your tuning in. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.